what has network management been? What are some of the common complaints or challenges that you've heard or seen from customers that have maybe gone into what Now is doing, how Now is trying to do it differently?
So, Saeed, it's a great question. And while we're bringing up the slide here, just to kind of visualize this, I think one of the trends that we've seen in the industry is that a lot of organizations are looking for areas of their IT footprint to get rid of the cost of complexity that's traditionally associated with, things like storage compute and how, organizations have shifted to the cloud native models like IaaS and PaaS that are coming from Amazon, GCP, Azure, and the like. And the same thing as, same shift has happened with applications where, they moved away from the cost complexity of building their own applications like AD infrastructures and like, and instead consuming that via SaaS type model. That disruption has been going on for the last 15 or 17 years. And the root of the problem is cost of complexity. There's not many organizations in this world that can throw enough money and resources at the problem. Right? And if I were sitting here talking to you about data center networks or applications like AD and the like, 15, 17 years ago, this argument was already had, and the industry, the market, our customers have told us what's been proven out and what's won. And that is that the complexity is just way too much for anybody to consume and to extract the value of to match anywhere near the amount of investment they're making in it. And it's having a negative impact on the organization. So if that trend is true, which I fundamentally believe it is, and I think the market's already proven that with IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, then we have to believe that most organizations are looking for other areas in their IT stack that they can have the same type of outcomes. Where else can I get rid of that cost complexity? Where else is that cost of complexity causing me problems? And one place that fundamentally has not been disrupted is the network stack. And if you think about the network stack, and there's a slide here just talking about, the different pieces and parts to this, I as the customer or as a traditional vendor have to put together a solution made up of disparate pieces and parts, different Wi-Fi systems, wireless systems, wired systems, different distribution systems, different visibility solutions, different network access control, DHCP, DNS, network management, config management, all these different pieces and parts. And then I've got to bolt solutions around it to try to deal with the complexity, which in and of itself is just more cost complexity. And it's fundamentally broken. And when coming back to your question about managed services, there's been models that have been in place or solutions or offerings that have been in place for the last 2 or 3 decades that this problem has existed, where I can move the complexity fundamentally from me to somebody else. That doesn't solve the cost of complexity. All I did was move it, right? And if I personally, as an organization, have a challenge extracting the value out of all this investment that I'm making because of the complexity, then how is anybody else going to do it really any better? Right? It might be masked from me, but is the outcome of the network actually delivering better results to me just because I move the complexity from here over to here? If you think about a traditional managed service, provider, or an outsourcing company, which by the way, Saeed, this 4-letter acronym, which is Network as a Service, has been defined multiple different ways to cater to whatever the solution is of the provider or vendor that's trying to capture this market opportunity. Right? It could be a packaging exercise of all this stuff that you see on the screen, wrapped up with some traditional services and, put into a lease to turn into a monthly payment. That's not as a service. That doesn't drive outcomes. It's still the same complexity. We have other providers that are basically calling their outsourcing that's been around for 3+ decades and calling that network as a service. Again, all I did was move the complexity from here to here. If you ask a managed service provider, hey, can you ensure that my network is always going to have the coverage, capacity, availability, performance that my users and devices and my business need. And it's always going to have the security and the capability. And it's going to be free of issues, known issues, especially bugs and the like that. Nobody's going to be able to deliver that because ultimately dealing with this problem that's on the screen turns every customer environment into a snowflake, which means it's a different run book, which means I can't touch it and I can't let anybody touch it. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart. They are very reactive in nature to, hey, when something breaks in this complexity, I'll go ahead and patch it for something that might have been fixed 2 years ago, but I'm not going to do it until that time, right? And they might be able to give you an uptime SLA, but just because an AP or a switch has been up and running for 10 years straight that does not necessarily equate to what is the performance and capability it's providing to the users and devices that are using the network, and thus the business. This stack, because of the complexity, is fundamentally not agile, and it can't keep pace with the business needs at all.